Today's video will contain subject matter that some people may be sensitive to, and as always, viewer discretion is advised. And if you have a story you want to send my way, just go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. However, I also wanted to come in here to say that today's video was sponsored by... No, I'm just kidding. It's not sponsored by anybody. Today's video contains two stories narrated by someone that I would consider to be one of the best, and that is Mr. SwampDweller. I work with Swamp on a semi-regular basis. I make quite a few thumbnails for his second channel, a few for his first is a main channel. I know TDN does most of the work on that, which I can't even hold a match to TDN's work, so. But I'm honored to work with him, as I always do, and am beyond honored that he's willing to be on this video with me. He had two stories that he was willing to send my way to include in this video, so yeah. Anyways, I hope everyone's having a beautiful day, and I hope y'all enjoy this because it's going to be a good one. So, here we go. I have a story that happened back whenever I was about 17 and lived in the small town that I was born and raised in. I don't really want to put too much out there about where it is, just saying that it's southern Midwest, in a town that no one here would probably know the name of. If it helps, the most exciting thing that happened to me while I lived there was when I got a job working the overnight shift at the new Casey's General Store during the summer between my junior and senior years. If you're unfamiliar with what a Casey's is, it's a gas station that also sells some fairly mediocre pizza and a lot of candy, but sometimes that mediocre pizza just hits differently. It's really hard to explain, honestly, but it's an okay place to work if you don't mind cashiering and sweeping for hours on end. Anyways, when I hit 16, my parents were really pushy about me getting a job to pay for myself. And then, when I hit 17, they were really pushy about me getting a job. I get it. We didn't have a lot of money as a family, and I was the oldest of 3 kids, and I don't necessarily blame them, but it was still incredibly stressful to be essentially pushed out into the world like that. They honestly were breathing down my neck and telling me to get out, but it is what it is. It wasn't even like I wasn't doing well in school. I wasn't valedictorian by any means, but I was an A-B average student. In the end, I basically just got tired of the nagging and went out to look for a part-time job, so they would quit asking. Thankfully, my town had just opened up a new gas station on the corner. And that gas station was, you guessed it, the Casey's General Store. It was an incredibly simple interview process. I told them that I had literally no experience in anything, and they told me that I would start the next Monday. Simpler times, I guess. Anyways, I went home and told my parents that I got hired for the overnight at Casey's, and they were less than thrilled. My dad asked why I didn't ask to work during the days, and then mentioned that I wouldn't be able to work there for more than a few months on that shift because of school. I shrugged it off and told him that he wanted me to get a job, so I got a job. Even better, it was a job that I could walk to. It was just down the block, and even at night, our small town had little to no traffic. When I started, the job went about as one would expect it to. I went through their couple hours of onboarding, and was told that I was going to shadow Ronald, the overnight cashier. I actually knew who Ronald was from around town, if that tells you how small our town was. Ronald was a 60-something-year-old man that had one hell of a beer gut and a long white beard. It kind of looked like Santa Claus, to be honest. Ronald was also kind of a pain. He was told to train me, and he took that personally, basically telling me that I had to do what he said as soon as he said it. I just nodded and started watching him do his job. He would occasionally tell me to run here and get this or that, and I would. It was pretty boring, to be completely honest with you. I shadowed him for about a week, which is way too much time considering it was just learning how to run the register and sweep or refix the shelves when it wasn't busy. Of course, that boring part of the job ended pretty much the first night that I was put on register alone, while Ronald was told to stock and clean the store. I knew what I was doing, so I rang up a few people within the first couple of hours with minimal issues. Then, around 1 in the morning, we had a guy walk in the door that was very clearly inebriated. When I say clearly, I mean this guy was practically swaying, and you could barely understand what he was saying when he spoke. He walked up to the counter with a pack of some sort of beer, and basically told me to ring it up because he, quote, wasn't done with the night. I kind of stared at him for a moment and was trying to decide if I could say no to this guy, considering he was clearly already hammered. Thankfully, I didn't have to do much thinking about it. Ronald walked up and pushed me aside to tell this guy that he would not be purchasing the alcohol, as he was clearly drunk. This guy was very unhappy with that statement, and he started screaming at Ronald and calling him any number of unsavory names. I remember Ronald basically saying, "You can call me whatever you want. I'm not selling to you, and you need to leave before I call the cops." After a bit more back and forth, he finally yelled something and walked away from the counter, and as soon as he did, Ronald looked over at me and told me to go get the phone from the back office to call the cops. At first I didn't get why, but then it kind of clicked. This guy obviously drove here like this, and we definitely needed to get the police out here to be aware that this man was about to get on the road. I agreed and stepped to get the phone off the receiver, and as soon as I dialed 911, I heard the bell on the door again, and then the sound of this guy yelling something. The operator answered, and I told her that we had a drunk guy that had come into the store and that he was attempting to buy more alcohol, and then also mentioned that he had driven up to the store. She asked if he was still there, and I told her that he had just re-entered the store and was now yelling at my coworker. As soon as I said this, I heard the man screaming, and then I heard Ronald yelling something back to the man. I couldn't tell what was being said, but I could tell that Ronald sounded somewhat panicked. I assumed he was just concerned that this guy was coming back in. That is, until I heard the loud bang. I heard 2 gunshots in succession. Like this guy had pulled the trigger twice on Ronald, and then I heard the sound of a body falling to the ground. I immediately shut and locked the back office door and told the operator that he had just shot my coworker and that we needed the police there now. She told me to calm down and that they were on their way, and asked me what the guy looked like. I described him as best as I could and told him what car he was driving, but I didn't know the plate number. As she's asking me questions about as much as she can, and telling me to stay calm, I start to hear the sound of the doorknob to the back office be forcefully shaken. I whispered that the man was trying to break into the back office, and she told me that the officers were less than a minute away, and to stay as quiet as I could, or to hide if possible. I was in a small room that had been converted into the manager's office. The only thing to hide under was a folding table that had been converted into a desk, or behind the rack of soda syrups that went to the fountain machine. I just kind of sat there thinking, my god, this is where I die. I'm going to be shot because some drunk guy wanted more beer and we wouldn't sell it to him. I remember thinking that this was the dumbest reason for this to happen, and that this all spun out of control for the stupidest of things. I was almost thankful that he was drunk at that moment, though, because he couldn't seem to figure out how to open the door, and it apparently never occurred to him to just kick it. It was a really flimsy door, One solid kick near the lock and it would have flown open. Thankfully, that just never occurred to him, and after a few moments of him trying to turn the knob and push the door, I heard the sound of him walking back through the emergency exit, which then triggered the alarm. Like I said, I just kind of sat there in a daze for several moments, until I heard the officer yelling out into the store, and then I heard one of them knock on the door. I told him it was just me in the room, and he asked me to open the door, so I did. They stepped in to clear the room and then gave me a quick pat-down since they really weren't sure who the shooter was beyond a basic description. Once that happened, they escorted me out of the office and out to the front of the building. When I got out there, I saw the EMTs lifting Ronald out onto the stretcher and getting him out of the building. Thankfully, he wasn't dead, just in bad shape with the blood loss and the injuries. They asked me about what had happened, and I explained it all from start to finish. How he came in drunk, we refused sale, and then he came back with a gun. They'd called the owner and the manager of the store to come down so they could get the security footage, and they asked me if I needed to contact someone to come and get me. I told them I was just going to go ahead and walk home, that I lived down the block. And they seemed a bit hesitant to let me go, to be honest. That was my first night on the register by myself, and my last night working there. I genuinely could not bring myself to go back after that. After that night, the store actually stopped being 24/7 for a while, probably because it was the only shooting that had happened in our town in a very long time, and no one was willing to work that shift after everything. My parents seemed disappointed that I didn't want to go back to working there, but after explaining to them what was going through my mind when the guy was trying to bust into the office, I think they kind of got the picture. It was seriously traumatizing, and I really feel like I came close to death. If he had managed to open that door, I would have most likely been shot and killed. I'm thankful that didn't happen, and that Ronald wasn't killed, but it's definitely one of those things that's going to stick with me for the rest of my days.
Last winter, I had an experience in Congaree National Park outside of Columbia that brought me to this show. It's a beautiful boardwalk that goes through the swamps and the cypress forest in them. If you look it up on the internet, this story will make some more sense. I lived in Columbia, South Carolina, and frequented Congaree National Park, so I'm rather familiar with the area. I often would jump the fence and walk the boardwalk at night, as it's super peaceful to walk the swamp and hear all the wildlife. They don't typically have rangers or guards after hours, so I was always alone. The last time I did this was in October of 2021. I took my usual stroll with a flashlight. I should mention again, between the insects and frogs, the sound is loud. But roughly a mile in, the sound completely stopped. I heard what I thought was my wife call me from the trail ahead, but she was not there. I was alone, and she was out of town. I then heard water sloshing to my right and saw nothing with my flashlight. I chalked it up to me being tired and kept moving. The wildlife started up shortly after again, and everything was fine. Maybe 15 minutes later, I noticed it got eerily quiet once again and heard swamp water sloshing on my left. But this time, it was more deliberate, like somebody was walking with a purpose. I was in a thick portion of the cypress and couldn't see more than 20 feet in front of me. And then I heard my wife's voice again. Again, she wasn't with me and she was out of town, certainly not moving through a swamp at 1 a.m. I saw a human silhouette for a split second, but it was distorted, off if you will. Very skinny, pale, and taller than me at 6 foot tall. I noped the hell out of there and ran almost 2 miles back to my truck and didn't slow up until I heard the wildlife again. As I said, this is a boardwalk that's in a swamp in the boonies. Nobody is walking around in the water at night without a light, and I don't know of any big animal that walks in a bipedal pattern, and I have spent most of my life outdoors. I feel I should add that I wasn't high or sleep deprived either. I typically like the woods at night as well. I've been friends with this guy named Ryan for 8 years now. We met in 4th grade. We just finished our junior year of high school. He and I have both been a fan of random walks for quite some time. We've been doing it for a couple of years now during the winter, spring, summer, and fall. Safe to say we love taking walks. He lives a few blocks away from a cemetery. We go straight 2 blocks to get there and take a right down a hill. There's this bridge we go through, then there's the cemetery. It's on a large hill, so most of it is not very visible unless you're up there. We got a little distant during our 8th grade year and didn't hang out too much. I became the popular kid, which was shocking since I've always been an introvert. But anyways, I digress. The point I'm making is we didn't go on many walks together. We rekindled our friendship our first year when COVID hit. We hung out more and talked more. We started walking to the cemetery more and noticed this yellow sports car that would be parked there. We didn't think too much of it. Maybe someone was grieving. It's a cemetery after all. We continued walking there, and the yellow car was at the same spot every single time we went. The lights were turned off. It just sat there for hours at a time. Again, we didn't think too much of it. After becoming a little more distant my sophomore year, we began hanging out more during the beginning of our junior year. We went to the cemetery like usual, and there was the same yellow car. It was just there doing nothing. We both know it wasn't a worker since the vehicle, just parked in the middle of the path you can drive through, not at the parking lot near the buildings. But we still carried on. Fast forward to May of 2022, we were just about to finish our junior year. We went to the cemetery at around 9 p.m. since I got a job at a pizza place in January. I always worked 4 to 9, sometimes 4 to 8, every weekday besides Thursday. We walked like usual, talking about true crime, how dry our love lives are, and about movies coming out soon. We noticed the car wasn't there for once. The cemetery has a lot of hills and stretches out. There are maybe a few thousand graves with still a lot of room. You must walk up a mountain to get to the main area, and most of the graveyard is still not visible because of the hills. We continue walking to where the car usually parks, since we've never been there. We continue talking about our issues and notice a vehicle driving in the path. We didn't think too much of it, but when it came close to us, we saw that it was yellow. The same type of headlights, the same license plate. It was dark out then, so we relied on our flashlights on our phones. We got a little freaked out but carried on. We walked a little bit more until the yellow car stopped at its usual place. We stopped roughly 30 feet away from the vehicle for a second with our flashlights. We heard the door open and footsteps approach us. We freaked out and shut off our phone. We bolted away. We were faster than the person, but we knew they were running after us. I asked Ryan in a whisper if he brought pepper spray with him, and of course he didn't bring it the one time that we needed it. We hid behind big gravestones for a minute, waiting to see if this person would run by, but they didn't come. They must have given up. We waited for a couple of more minutes and bolted out of the cemetery, entirely out of breath. We joked about it a little since before we went into the graveyard we said, "Imagine if something terrifying were to happen to us." Speak of the devil. I wonder what would have happened to us that night if they caught us. I wonder just what they would have done to us. I'm glad that Ryan and I took extreme caution when we saw that car. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be writing this right now.
A few years ago, a couple of old military buddies of mine and I decided that we wanted to go take a road trip around some seemingly random places here in the good old US of A. The three of us knew each other way back in grade school, and we all grew up together, which eventually led to us all joining the army. Two of us got deployed, myself and James, but Ricky ended up with an honorable discharge because of a medical issue. He was actually diagnosed with a heart condition that caused problems with the muscle, and they determined that he wouldn't have been able to be sent overseas. Not really relevant, but it helps to show that we all knew each other really well, and we all trusted each other. We had all been home for a few years, and we were pretty much told that we were back permanently, barring any craziness when we would be called back. Because we were finally back home and not likely to be called out, we wanted to take a road trip out to some of the more open parts of the country, like the national parks down in Utah. Our plan was to head east through Nevada, and then into Utah to go see the canyons out there, and we planned to head to Bryce and Zion National Parks. I don't remember why we wanted to go these routes, but the three of us agreed that we weren't getting any younger, and now was the time to go see the sights that this part of the country had to offer. Because it was early spring, and it wasn't getting too terribly hot yet, we decided that we would make it a point to camp out either in the open, or just spend the night sleeping in the car when necessary. Ricky had a decent-sized van that had more than enough space for all of us to push the seats back and sleep, while one slept in the back seat. We packed up all of our things, made sure we had enough cash to get gas and any supplies, and the three of us headed out onto the road with nothing more than a basic sense of, let's drive east until we get too tired to drive anymore, and then we'll enjoy the great outdoors. This plan worked for most of the first day. We took turns driving for a few hours, trying to spread it out amongst the three of us as much as we could, but also making sure that we weren't too tired. We planned on taking I-80 most of the way, but also decided that we would take a small detour in Utah to head down 196 toward the Dugway military base. None of us had ever been there, but I wanted to see the area for really no reason. Plus, from there, we could just head south for a few hours to hit the areas for Bryce and Zion National Parks. Now, I'm not stupid. I know that even with a military background, you don't just drive to a military base, and you sure as hell don't camp anywhere near the ground that isn't a designated camping area. So, after we got around that area, we made a trip out to a small campground about 30 or so minutes to the northwest, and we made our plans to stay there for the night. The night that we got there, it was absolutely beautiful. We opted to pull the tents out and spend the full evening outside under the stars. We got the camp set up right next to where we parked the van, and we had a really small fire going as it was getting a bit chilly. We spent the entire night chatting about random things that we wanted to do now that we were home, and just having a nice evening as three friends out in the middle of nowhere. A couple of hours later, right before we were about to call it a night, we were all just sitting there and heard what sounded like a weird screaming. We all kind of stopped and looked around the area to see if we could see anything, but I think we all quickly went to the same conclusion. Coyotes. We'd all heard them before, and the sound was pretty close to what we knew to be coyotes, so we moved on from there and decided that it wasn't a huge deal. We just needed to keep an eye out for them if they got closer. We all decided to call it a night and head to sleep, thinking that we could just get through the creepy sounds that they were making if we passed out. We all started getting in our tents, and that was when it went from probably coyotes to what the absolute hell is out there. The screaming changed in pitch from that high screech to a much lower tone, and then it started to change even more into what sounded like legitimate laughter. We tried to justify it as just being an animal, but it almost sounded like this thing was a person, laughing in an almost cartoonishly evil way, if that makes any sense. It would laugh, slowly change into that high-pitched screeching, and then shift back to the lower-pitched laughter. We decided that it wasn't worth sleeping outside, and that we would just pack our stuff and head to a nearby hotel or parking lot to spend the rest of the night. We shoved our tents and everything else back into the van in record time, and within 10 minutes, we're back on the road. We got back in the car. Ricky started the van up and hit the headlights, and we could see something. It was standing out behind a large rock, probably 40 or so feet away. I couldn't really make out a shape of what this thing was, but it was bipedal, and it was watching us. The other guys said that it looked kind of human, but something about it was off. Like, it was a human mixed with something else. I remember it had a person-like shape, but the face that I saw was not that of a person. It was more of a creature. After a few seconds of us just staring at this thing and it staring back at us, Ricky hit the high beams and it reacted to them by pulling itself behind the rock. We decided that we did not want to know, nor did we need to know what the hell this thing was. We gunned it back onto the road and decided to just get back to heading south and stop at the first sign of civilization. The three of us did not say a word about the thing the entire time we were on the road that night. I think we were all trying to come up with a logical explanation for what it was. We didn't have any other encounters or anything like that, and we pressed on with the road trip as normal afterwards. We've only spoken about this thing once or twice since, and I think we all want to say that this thing was maybe an escaped military experiment, because we were so close to the base. But we also don't want to think about that possibility. I have no idea if it was just some freak animal out there, or if it was a cryptid of some sort, but I know that I will never forget about it. So this was a collection of late-night, scary, creepy horror stories that will drive you into a state of terror or something. I don't know. Just creepy late-night stories. Stories that happen in the dead of the night, right? It's dark outside. Things are creepy because you can't see. That's exactly what it is. You can't see, so you can't process, so you're scared. Actually, not so much in these. But anyways, featuring SwampDweller. A huge thank you to SwampDweller. The dude needs no introduction at this point. I am assuming at this point at least. Needs no introduction. Most of you probably know who he is. Great guy. Fantastic person, honestly, to work with on a personal level. And just really good at what he does. Fun dude. Absolute living meme he is. Anyways, hopefully you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button. If you really liked it and you're new to the channel, consider hitting subscribe. And if you would do something for me, and that is just leave me a comment letting me know what you thought of the video. It would mean the world to me, to be completely honest with you. So please consider that. Also, if you want to support further, never expected, always appreciated, the join button, the thanks button, or the Patreon button, which isn't really a button, but it's down in the description, where you can get early access to content like this for like $1 a month, I think. I don't think. I know it is $1 a month. What am I saying? Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed the video. Really, I do. And I hope you look forward to the rest of the content of this month. The month flew by somehow. I'm kind of sad about that, but it's what it is. Anyways, I'll see you all in the next video. But my friends, until then, sleep well.